I am Wangzhe. I have years of experience in the coal mining businesses. So when I was handling the businesses together with the Aluminum Corporation of China, I had a thorough understanding about logistics, futures, and production in Mongolia. So I would love to share with you about my ideas of the Mongolian coal resources and their transportation. And those are my slides. I would also touch upon the futures of coal. This is the content. First, major Mongolian coal resources and its application. Second, introduction of the coal business in Mongolia. Third, Mongolian coal logistics and transportation. And finally, Mongolian coal delivery. You must be very familiar with the coking coal market. For some domestic coal, they are mainly from Shanxi province in Mongolia and Shandong. For seaborne coal, mainly from Australia, Russia, and USA. For Mongolian coal, they are mainly from the ETT mine. For the other mines, they're the non-coking coal. So ETT is the mainstream. As to the Mongolian coal resources, as you know, years ago, because of some diplomatic reasons, Australian coking coal import was shrinking. And because of the geographical advantage of coal in Mongolia, the import of Mongolian coal was rising up instead. The production areas of Mongolian coal is in the South Gobi province, which is adjacent to our borders through several ports like Erlinghat, Mandula, Ganchimadu, and Tek. We imported coal from Mongolia. This is a map of Mongolia. There are some colored dots on this map. Those are the main mines. As to, I'm not sure if you can see them clearly. Those dots are quite small, but most of them are thermal coal. As to coking coal, they are in blue. You can see two blue dots. I will share more details later on. Here you can see it clearer. In the middle of this map, there is a mine called TT mine, Tavantogoi. It is home to the biggest reserves and the most diversified resources in the mine. On the left, that's Sxcoal port. And there is a mine close to it called Mark mine. And the feature of the Mac mine is that it's 1/3 coking coal. And also there are some thermal coal preserved there. On the right, there are some smaller mines. They are all thermal coal. Now let's learn something about the mining rights in TT mine. TT mine is a world level big mine, and in Mongolia, TT mine is one of the main contributors to its GDP, and the state ownership accounts for 85%, while the public holds about 14% of the ownership. The businesses and entities in Mongolia hold another 0.05%. The TT mine gives 94% of the mining rights to the South Gobi province in Mongolia. This is the largest undeveloped high-quality coking coal mine in the world. The proven reserve is about 7.4 billion tons, and coking coal takes up 73% of the total reserves of coal in Mongolia. And speaking of the 7.4 billion tons of proven reserve, it's only shown in the table, but there must be some potential reserves unnoted in those reports. So this mine is highly promising because we haven't gone very deep underground. So I think In the future, if we keep exploration, the total reserve will be over 10 billion tons. On the right is another map. It's a brief introduction about its transportation scenario. You could see the transportation lines. Let's change to a bigger one, a bigger map. On the upper left corner, that's another map of the whole country. Starting from Ulaanbaatar southward, that's the main railway for the transportation. As to TT Mine, there is no railway connecting TT Mine, so it relies on the bus transportation. And on the right corner, that's the distribution of the coal in one mine. For ETT mine, since it's very big in size, we divide it into different mine zones, and we usually mention about the west side and the east side of ETT. The difference between the two zones is that in the east zone of ETT mine, the total sales of the coal must be handled by the Aluminum Corporation of China exclusively. For the west side, the coal explored there will be sold through tendering and bidding. And we can see the photo of a listed company in Hong Kong from Mongolia. It is listed based on its resource background, and it builds up its own fleet, its own logistics system, and its sales system in China. And I also show a mine in South Gobi province. The South Gobi province has its mining right in this smaller mine as well. So since it's very small in size, it hasn't been financed yet in the capital market, and the total output is not very high. And because of the unstandardized mining practices, the coal quality is far short of expectation. For example, the thermal coal might be mixed up with the weathered coal, so undermining the quality of the coal. And we can also see a satellite photo. We can see the operational zone, the yard, the mining place. The mine, by dragging the coal from the pit and put the coal on the yard. You could see those lines on the right of this map. Those are the yard places. And then we transport the coal from the yard to the ports. And on the bottom right corner, that is a tourist spot locally. We could see a big sculpture featuring the Genghis Khan riding on a horse. And those are the equipment for transportation. And you could see there are many big tram cars, the mining cars. They are actually very big in reality, but they look so small on such big pieces of land. And here we show two tables. There are three main mines, ETT, ER, and smaller TT in Ganji model. ETT has number 3 and number 4 seams, and number 4 mining seam is the mainstream, because for number 4 mining seams, they share all of the features of the coking coal. And for number 3 and number 4, the difference lies in volatiles. For number 4 mining seam, the volatiles are lower compared to number 4. It's about 23 or 24, but for number 4 mining seam, it's around 27 to 28. As to the second mine, ER digs into number 3 mining seam. As to smaller TT, they dig into number 4 and number 8 seams. But as to smaller TTs, they may mix the coal with some weathered coal. As to volatiles in smaller TT mine, it's about 27 to 28. But the total ash content is much higher in smaller TT mine, and recovery is poorer compared to ETT. As to distance to Ganchimoto port, they're almost the same, 270 kilometers distance. As to production volume, ETT has 10 million tons in the east and 8 million tons in the west. ER is home to an overall output of 10 million tons, and smaller TT is lower in output. It's ranging from 1 to 2 million tons. As to washing plants, since the big ETT mainly sell the raw coal, so there is no washing plant. As to ER, since it has been financed in the capital market, it has established a 15 million tons of a wash plant. It's very big. For ER, they sell the clean coal, the washed clean coal. And there is another port, Sxcoal. There are several big players in Sxcoal port: South Gobi Resources, MAC, Usuk, and TU. As to the distance of those mines to the Sxcoal, they are very close, mainly 60 to 70 kilometers distance, and the TU is the most distant one, about 100 kilometers from the port. As to output, South Gobi Resources is home to 5 million tons, MAC 6 million tons, Usuk 2 million tons, and TU mine 1 million tons. As to the coal types, they are dominated by 1/3 coking coal. There may be some superficial coals belonging to thermal coal, but not very big in volume, because thermal coal may have less value. As to wash plants, South Gobi Resources has a 2 million ton of washing plant. MAC has 1 million ton of wash plants. For the other two, none. Because for 1/3 coking coal, ash content is pretty low, so washed clean coal is no different from the raw coal in that sense. Mainly, they will have to look at the price of their coal. This slide is about the number of trucks cleared for Mongolia coal. Spanning from 2012 till 2019, we could see the different bar charts. And for the two ports in Sxcoal and Ganchimoto, they're similar, but Ganchimoto is a little bit higher in terms of the number of clearance. And those bars lasted until 2019 because data since 2020 were influenced by the epidemic, so they are not put here. The total number, for example, in 2018 and 2019 is around 35 million tons cleared. Major Mongolian coal resources and their application. The key point is the coking coal in Mongolia has some edges in terms of their types. First of all, their main coking coal, and secondly, their ash content is proper, about 10.5. We could wash it to 10.5, so it's very fine. And additionally, its G index is around 85 after washing. 85 is not very big in terms of the caking index, but it's fairly good enough. As to the coal intensity after washing, it could be as high as 65 to 66. So many coking plants, once enjoying proper distance, will take those coal as the mainstream coal products. The volume can be guaranteed as well, but in the recent 2 years, the situation is influenced by the pandemic. That is another story, and the resources are widely applied. We have basically sold the coal from Mongolia everywhere in China. The farthest went to Yunnan, Guangxi provinces, Baogang Steel, northeastern China, and Shanghai. They can accept Mongolian coal because the indexes of Mongolian coal have no big loopholes. So speaking of application, it's very widely applied in China.
对，这个就是蒙古煤呢，
This is about
之前我们
the composition breakdown of the Mongolian coal. When we received the Mongolian coal in Dalian Commodities Exchange, Shanxi coal was very competitive. And as to Mongolian coal and Australian coal, the economics of their delivery were worse than Shanxi coal. But gradually, the Commodities Exchange found some problems and did some readjustments. After the readjustments, in 2017, I think it was probably 2017 or 2018, they signed a contract. And as to the calculation of premiums and discounts, they washed the clean coal from Mongolia was taken as zero in terms of premiums and discounts because of its very stable performance of all the indexes. And coal blending volume is very small because in the coking plants, coal blending is usually painstaking. They are very confused about where the coal comes from, what is the type of the coal. After the commodities exchange readjusted the parameters, the washed coal will see a distinct advantage in Mongolian coal compared to the Shanxi coal. It's more economical. So after this reform in the commodities exchange, Mongolian coal attracted attention from investors nationwide. Please allow me to briefly introduce the features of Mongolian coal. It's very professional, and I know you are all the experts. I am a layman. For example, ash content. Raw coal in Mongolia coal is around 14 to 15. If we want to realize economical washing and selection, the 10 to 15 ash content is easy, as the sulfur content is around 0.6 to 0.8%. Volatiles, I wrote around 25 because there are two seams for exploration number 3 and number 4, and the overall volatiles will be less than 28. As to the G index, if it is single time washing, it will be over 85. The maximum could be 90. And as to CSR, single wash will give you over 65. As to the water content, there is no need to talk about it. So if we look at the washed coal quality in Mongolia, very few types could be part of the blending procedure. For those available for blending,
对于这个沿项的那个指标的这个差别就不是很大，所以
the indicators may not be very much different, so the total volume of blending will not be very big. As to the downstream, most wash plants wash the coal independently, so they can sell at an ideal price. Many coke plants, when procuring the coal, they have very stringent criteria for the Mongolian coal. Still, this slide is about the Mongolian coal resources and their application. I know this page is too technical. For example, let's distill some indicators. Speaking of intensity, the Shanxi coking coal, high sulfur coking coal, and the middle sulfur coking coal have fairly good intensity, but Mongolian has a lot of mines. As the Australian coking coal, on usual days, the price is no low. So if we have to judge the cost, Mongolian coking coal has an advantage, cost speaking. So it has no big weakness compared to the other two.
蒙煤贸易这个介绍这块这个核心哈，就是因为它具
Introduction of trading.
蒙煤
Because of the long distance of the Mongolian
梯
coal,
矿到
starting from the exploration in ETT mine to the ports,
所以主要呢还是以
some main railways are not developed yet, so the main transportation method is through the cars and the trucks. So that's one biggest uncertainty because it may be influenced by the price.
限制的政策，
There are so many restrictive policies. For example,
这个车的这个超载的吨数，
the overload capacity requirement for the trucks in Mongolia, the management of the fleet, and some on-site checkup
业啊，包括有一些税收
policy,
在蒙古的
the employment policy, taxation policies, and so on. There are so many terms to consider.
就是他必须要用蒙古的司机，
And they require those trucks to be driven by the local drivers, and they must have a Mongolian local license plate on the trucks. So the coal trading has been subject to many restrictions logistically.
检验指标，这个检验指标就是根据
This is about the inspection indicators. It's mainly decided by the exchange. For example, ash, sulfur,
第二层厚度
G index,
蒙煤也是没有太大区别，
maximum thickness of
在
gelatin layer.
值应该也都在个15、16，
It's about 15 to 16. At the maximum, it could be 17. CSR,
刚才也说了，应该在
as I said, it's around 65 because during the inspection, CSR may differ greatly.
做出来呢，可能叫
For smaller ovens, it could be smaller, but as to the big ovens,
结果都
the results will be premium.
静止体反射这个
And as to the standard deviation
也
of
是交易所
vitrinite random reflectance,
要求的，还有
this is also newly updated by this exchange. And also 1 to 1.6 ratio is required by the exchange. This slide is about the trading procedure, and it is our focal points.
蒙古国 TT 矿出来以后，因为之前呢，
The first stage is ETT mine.
蒙煤到国内进口，
Previously, when we import Mongolian coal, there are two scenarios.
情况呢就是从
First,
矿直接装车，
from the big ETT mine, it's directly loaded onto the trucks and passed on to the gantry model.
这个呢
And then at gantry model
关
port,
堆场通关这个能力一下降呢，
the customs clearance capacity of the port has been lower, so there was heavy traffic jam.
甘旗毛肚口岸很近的
That's why it hit us that at about 25 kilometers distance from Genchi model,
出来的这个
we established another yard. For the trucks from ETT mines, they unload in the yard and then they get back to the ETT mine to load coal again.
这个甘旗毛肚口岸过境的这
And
个
then they pass the customs through Genchi model ports. So basically, there are two fleets of trucks doing this operation that improves the efficiency of transportation and can guarantee that
拉把这个煤拉出来，变成
there will be no traders
这样保证它
turning the ETT coal to be their own
从甘旗
ownership.
毛肚口岸到国内的
And when it comes to the domestic yards,
洗煤厂到终端客户后边
they will go through the washing plants and then come to the hands of the end users.
蒙煤贸易的三大环节，一个是境外环节，一个是
Three processes: beyond the border, at the port, and domestic.
这个节点集中点还是就刚才我
Beyond the border, I have just now introduced about the yard called
它那个
Tsagankat Yard in Mongolia.
比较混乱，就不像我们国内啊有院儿啊，
It's quite
地啊，
chaotic.
这个
In China, we have a
这个
clean yard,
各种
cement road and stringent management. But in the cart yard in Mongolia, there are many individual owners. They just circle their own piece of land and charge randomly by every ton. And some companies lost their coal over there, and some of the coal were wrongly blended. So in Tsagan yard, management is really painstaking for some Chinese enterprises and traders. They frown upon extending overseas because the management is not closed loop. There are so many loopholes and uncertainties. So it's almost out of control. As to the stage of the border, starting from the Sxcoal yard through China-Mongolia border, it's much easier because we have surveillance at the customs office. The customs office will approve and receive. So as to the ownership of the coal, it's at an easier circumstance. As to domestic management, we have several yards particular. Right now, we ask for closed yard. If the storage yard is not closed, we don't allow the coal to be stored in open air. Otherwise, we will turn them into the containers because the management of closed warehouses and containers is much easier and clear cut. In the future, there will be fierce competition in terms of the yards because for closed yards, there must be heavy investment to build them. And the efficiency of storing the coal is not very high. It's the same thing with containers because for the ports, there are very limited pieces of land. Most of those ports are mountainous areas, and if there is no water, it will be challenging in environmental protection. I sense that we are running out of time, so let's speed up. Factors restricting coal import and transport from Mongolia. I want to highlight C certification. This year, the port clearance is inefficient because of the pandemic, and for epidemic prevention and control, it's really troubling us. Recently, China has several cases coming from Mongolia through the ports, for example, the Sxcoal port. For Mandula port, there was limited transportation volume, and the Genchimoto port is the priority. We put all our efforts into Genchimoto port in terms of the pandemic prevention and control. So Genchimoto will be at a safer place in terms of the outbreak of COVID-19. But as you know, there are 3 million population in Mongolia. Every day, there are several thousand people infected with COVID-19. So I think the pandemic prevention and control is very severe in Mongolia, and that's why there was limited import from Mongolia recently. And I've talked about premiums and discounts just now. This is an advantage in Mongolian coal. And this slide is about delivery warehouse. It's another focal point. Previously, since I participated in the Aluminum Corporation of China's businesses about the delivery warehouse, and that kicked off my career in this business. There are 2 ports that have their delivery warehouses. And on the right, there was a table about delivery timetable, but it takes time to explain it, so I will just skip it. This is the overall delivery situation of Mongolian coal. We could refer to the official website to get the details. Some futures company can help us to write off the receipts or handle some procedures, and we welcome all our customers to approach me to get more answers if you're interested. And those are about the commonplace questions during the delivery process. But in the interest of time, I only give you some highlights. Right now, the delivery of the coking coal is a very concerning issue for the commodities exchange. You must give the information beforehand, and the commodities must have some adequate quantity and high quality. The coal in the warehouses must be qualified, and the volume could not have any error. Otherwise, you cannot register the receipts and you will have troubles in delivering the coal. So please be reminded about the significance. And there may be some details, for example, the criteria for charging and the time point of delivery and insufficient storage capacity. We welcome you to contact us privately for more communication. And we are happy to do good services to you. And that's all for my sharing. Thank you.